Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the first virtual panel of Bookstore Romance Day 2023. I'm so grateful to have you all here. My name is Billy, and I am the founder and organizer of Bookstore Romance Day. And I just really wanted to take this moment to thank all of you. Your support throughout the years has been fantastic, and it just keeps growing, and I am so grateful to all of you. I hope that you all buy books from your local independent bookstore because we rely on you to stay in business. That is my day job, and really grateful to everyone who comes in and makes a purchase. So without me getting too sappy and sentimental, I am going to turn this all over to Kel, who will be your moderator today. So take it away, Kel.
Okay, so this is like the second or third time I've ever used Zoom, so be kind. My name is Kel. I work at Main Street Books and at Second Flight Books. They're owned by the same person, so I get the wonderful opportunity of working at two bookstores. I'm definitely not a rookie bookseller. I've been at a long time, but this is only my second panel I've ever moderated, and this is my first one with so many wonderful, amazing authors. So we are doing a panel for Bookstore Romance Day Romantasy, and I'm sure everybody knows what Romantasy is, but it's a subgenre of romance and fantasy like mashed together, where the romance takes a bigger sort of role versus like a fantasy little romantic subplot. One of the, what's the word? Rules basically of the romance genre is usually happily ever after or happily for now. We all know regular fantasy doesn't have that. That's not to say Romantasy has to, but it's kind of nice when it does, because I happily ever after. So today we've got Sue Lynn Tan, author of Daughter of the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior. My Daughter of the Moon Goddess is inside, and I'm not going to go get it, so this is the only one you get. We've got, say hi, Sue. I knew you before.
Hi, it's so nice to see you here, though, and everyone else. Thank you so much for having me.
We've also got, I have to go through my stack, Celestine Martin, author of Witchful Thinking, Glare, and Kiss and Spell. Yeah, I'm lucky. I got one. Say hi.
Hello.
I didn't know you before, but I know you now.
We've
got Sophie H. Morgan, author of The Witch is Back. Yeah, I have that one too.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
And we've got Jacqueline Carey, author of Castiel's Servant, among many other books. I don't have a physical copy of that, so I can't, so pretend.
Hi.
And we've also got Lish McBride, Rough Around Hedges. I don't have a copy of that one either. I have the ebook. So here, you can see my phone. Fine.
Good morning. Ish.
Ish. It is a morning.
I don't morning and it's 7 a.m. here. So this should be fun.
Oh, it's
Fine.
3 p.m. where I am. You should be where I am.
I should be where you are. Absolutely. This is real rough. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Oh, but you get to hang out with me. So there's your
Upsides.
Yeah. And we've got Claire Legrand, author of A Crown of Ivy and Glass, among other, the Furyborn trilogy, which I also have that, but that's inside. I'm not going to go get it.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So I did make up my own questions. Kudos to me. Okay. We're going to start, just dive right in with the most, I feel, common question. This is for everybody. I don't single people out. And that's, what are some inspirations that led you to writing your books? The ones specifically for the panel. So sorry, Claire, you can't talk about Furyborn. Whoever wants to start can start. I'm not going to single anybody out. We're going to do volunteers.
Okay, I'll start because you just mentioned Fairyborn. So hi, I'm Claire Legrand. So nice to be here. Thank you all for coming. The book that I'm talking about today is A Crown of Ivy and Glass, which is the first book in the Middle Mist trilogy. And it's like the vibes are Bridgerton meets A Court of Thorns and Roses, but with like really awesome mental health representation, which is one of my favorite things. And the inspiration came from a couple of different places. Each book in this trilogy is inspired by a different classic ballet. So the first book is inspired by Giselle, the second book is inspired by The Firebird, and the third book is inspired by Swan Lake. You know, inspiration just comes from everywhere. So ballet and music was a huge inspiration, but also I saw this image years ago on Pinterest of this girl blindfolded walking into a hedge maze with her arm outstretched. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. She's going to some sort of hedge maze portal. And that and many other things, which I won't talk about now, sort of contributed to this idea of, okay, this is a magical world. And one of the things is that they can transport themselves through greenery. And that's sort of how A Crown of Ivy and Glass began. I also was it's very important to me to write a fantasy series that features heroines who are dealing with mental health challenges and body issues and childhood trauma, and still get to fall in love and wear fabulous dresses and have their happily ever afters. So that's the main inspiration behind this book.
I don't have anything fancy like that. Mine is not set on a ballet. I blame growing up in the 90s. So I'm Sophie H. Morgan. I wrote The Witch's Back, and I grew up with Charmed and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and yes, exactly. And so basically my characters are what you would expect, you know, ordinary, you would think ordinary, but they've got extraordinary powers, and that's kind of the sticking point. That's what screws up their lives. And I think that's what I love about like what I'd call cozy romantasy, which is what I think mine would be classed as, is that it's very like low key, and the magic tends to ruin their happily kind of, if you picture a stream, it would be the tree that goes across it, you know, it screws everything up. So I guess it's just trying to take what you think would be an idyllic life and then throwing a rock in the river and seeing what happens, what all the ripples are.
Well, for my part, 20 some years ago, I wrote a book called Kushiel's Dart, because I loved fantasy, but there were almost no female characters and there were no adult relationships. So that's how I got into what is now known as romantasy. And 20 some years later, this is the same story from the other side. The hero who Olivia Blake blurted out, hot priest, tells his story.
I'll go. My book, Wishful Thinking, it's basically like my version of The Charmed, but in New Jersey, set at the Jersey Shore. So it's about a family of witches, especially three sisters and their cousin, and they get drunk one night on rum. They get drunk on rum and they decide to make a wish, and so the wish kind of plays havoc in their lives. So each one of the books is going to feature one of the witches. So Wishful Thinking is book one. That's Lucy's story. She falls for a merman. Her high school crush was a merman and he moves back home. That's book one. And then book two, her cousin Ursula ends up falling for a fey prince who's stuck in New Jersey trying to find an enchanted kiss. So this was definitely, oh my goodness, I love writing this book. Like I read it recently. I was like, hey, that's not too bad. I like it. So it's just my little lighthearted, whimsy book, My Little Witches. I'm working on book three. I'm very excited about book three and that witch. So those are my stories, just like fun. Like I said, I grew up Sabrina the Teenage Witch, watching reruns of Teen Witch and just wanting to like be a witch or like, so that's my story. So
Great. So hi, sorry, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Susan, the author of Dark the Moon Goddess and Heart of the Sun Warrior. I like to describe it as a fantasy of immortals, magic, and love. And it's inspired by a legend that I've loved since I was a child, that of Chang'e, the Chinese moon goddess. It's a story that's often retold during the Mid-Autumn Festival, which is very important to Chinese people everywhere. And for those unfamiliar, I'm just going to go into like a really brief overview of how 10 suns were set to like rise in the sky and they're burning the world. And a very brave archer came to shoot down the sun to save the world. And in return, he was given an elixir of immortality that if he took it, he would go to the skies and live with the gods. But he didn't take it because he loved his wife, Chang'e. But Chang'e ended up taking the elixir by herself, flying to the moon. And so that legend was one that stayed in me over time, maybe because of the ending. I do like romance and happy endings and everything as well. And so I imagined, what if she had a different reason for taking it? I imagined that it would have to be a very big reason. And I thought, what if she had a daughter? And so this is pretty much the idea that inspired the story that came. And there are grand kingdoms, glittering courts, legendary creatures and dragons, but at its heart, it's a story of love, both family and romantic.
So I'm Lish McBride. The book I'm here for today is Rough Around the Hedges. It's contemporary fantasy romance. It's set in Seattle. It's about a witch that wants to become a hedge witch, and the way I have it set up is that basically a witch can then, go and specialize. So like going to university, like her dad is a big academic kind of witch, which is called an arcanist. And so he very much does not want her to be a hedge witch. He thinks it's kind of beneath their family name. The inspiration was basically like, I love paranormal romance. I love all that. And I love the big explodey plots, but I also kind of wanted to see what the day-to-day life, like the issues that kind of we all face, but just from a perspective of like werewolves and witches and minotaurs and whatever else random thing I want to shove in there. It just came out this week. It's been a nightmare. If any of you've already read it, the printer decided to release, I don't know how many copies of an early draft, like a really early draft. So some of you have read the correct book, and some of you have read the first draft. If your book was under 300 pages, that is not the correct book. And please get a hold of me or the bookstore. And like last night, I found out that the printer also released the ebook early to Hoopla. So if you got it from the library, there's a good chance you also got the right book. Yeah, it's been great.
Oh, no.
It's really just, I mean, I'm over the moon about the whole thing. So my apologies, but hopefully you got the right book. Kelly, I know you got the right book, so you're fine.
Oh no. I like a good misprint as much as the next bookseller. I mean, one book I have, the cover was printed still with that cyan, magenta, yellow test strip, and it was bound upside down and backwards. So I bought it because I had to have it. But that's a little bit more than a weird aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a good time.
Oh my goodness. I am so sorry. Well, I had geese for a second, so yay. Okay, we've got more questions. I tried my best to come up with really fun questions, but not real difficult questions, because I'm a bookseller and I'm not going to make it any harder on y'all than what everything else about publishing already does. I'm here to help you, and I like to think I'm generally a fun person, and I try to make things as amusing as possible because I am easily amused. So it's fine. Okay, so this one, as I was reading, I was noticing different tropes that we like, that a lot of people don't like, because yeah, I went to Goodreads for all of these. I'm like, you guys are wrong. So for everyone again, what is your favorite trope to write? And is it the same as your favorite trope to read? And go.
I'll go. I absolutely love enemies to lovers. I think it's probably the trope that defines romantasy the most, I'd say, enemies to lovers. And annoyingly, this book that I'm talking about today is a second chance romance, which I don't like to read. So that was a really interesting development as I started to write it. But it does have a little bit of enemies to lovers in there, because they were contracted to marry when they were young, and then he disappeared when they were 21 without a word 7 years ago, and then he comes back. So there is an element of enemies to lovers in there, but I think enemies to lovers, it just has the best banter. And I don't know about everyone else, but I just love writing and reading dialogue that just goes back and forth like tennis.
Yeah, I agree. I like enemies to lovers if it's done well. I like rivals to lovers when they're like going after the same thing, and then it's like, but it's not as like a little bit snarky. I love fake dating. Oh, I love fake dating. Just like, oh, let's pretend you're my girlfriend. I love reading and writing that. That's fun. Yeah, those are my two big ones. I always love, like, get away from my wife. Like that, she's my wife, and that's my husband.
Touch her, I'll kill you.
Yes. Oh, yes. I
heard that
love
one.
that. Oh man, because I mean, anything in Willow, I love, because my mom would watch Willow, channel 11 all the time. It would come on, she stopped cleaning, like, sit down, Willow's on. And so that's where I just absolutely live that whole adventure.
I really like Forbidden Love, and I think it's kind of like, it can be quite broad. People who can't be together. It could be an enemy thing. It could be opposing sides. It could be circumstantial as well. But what I really like, both reading and writing, is like the tension, the angst, and fighting something that also pulls you a particular way and everything. So I really do like the complexity of the emotions and everything that goes into that.
Gotta love some pining.
Oh yes, pining, definitely.
Yes, it's like yearning. I want you. I can't have you. Yes.
Exactly. Oh my god.
I think I like most tropes, honestly. Like, I mean, from a reader, even if it's a trope I don't like, if they do it well, because I don't particularly like friends to lovers, which is what this is. And so I reference Willow 100% in this book. Like, that's that. Yep, Mad Mardigan forever. But if it's done well, I'll read it. Like, Enemies to Lovers isn't my favorite, but again, I love it. I really don't like second chance romance, but again, if the author can pull it off, I'll read it.
Hard.
The one I tend to like always write myself is found family, like that trope of just that putting together their own support system seems to be a returning theme.
I gotta give up a second for Forbidden Love when I think about it. There's something about a taboo. And it's kind of fun to create a situation with a taboo, which is
situations.
World building comes in. But yeah, it's so satisfying.
Also love Forbidden Love. Also love found family very, very much. And I also love I call it the queen and her knight dynamic. So when one character is like the chosen one or has some sort of special ability and like the burden of the world is on their shoulders, and then the other person is like duty bound to protect them no matter what, and is very, see, Cassio servant right there.
Clap, buddy. I love it.
So I like to write and read that. That's one of my favorites.
I agree.
I can say I do really like the different taboos, like, oh, I'm a proper lady, I cannot fall in love with you, and then they do. Did you like my really fake Regency accent?
Yes.
I love doing it. It's fun. We're gonna go off of that and oh yeah, Grumpy Sunshine. Those are
Grumpy
fun.
grumpy.
I'm the sunshine. My husband is the grumpy. It's fine. He's also, I like big and little. One with
Oh,
big, and then
Got it.
the other half of the relationship is the little, because I'm the little, and my husband is the big, and he got big hands, big man hands, and we love big man hands, right?
We do.
We do. But I will say that in my own personal life, it was insta love, and I know a lot of people trash insta love, but we've been married for 21 years now, so it can work.
mm.
And a lot more people seem to like the slow burn. I prefer insta love, like push home, they're in love now. Slow burn, because it's like, I don't know slow burn. I've never experienced that, because it was like he beat me in chess. I'm like, I have to date this man, and then we got married. Nerds.
I think a lot of people mix insta love with insta attraction.
Yeah.
'Cause those aren't quite same, but they think a lot of readers like convolutes too.
Yeah, it's a lot of insta love. I don't think it's these. Oh, he's so hot. I'm in love with him now. No. My husband played the trumpet. I played the drums. So I was like, oh, he beat me at chess. He's smarter than me. Oh, so it was like love at first checkmate. Isn't that a title of a romance book? It might be.
Yes,
Yes,
it is. Allie Hazelwood.
Yep, that was
Yeah.
us. Oh, it is.
No, Fate.
I have to read that.
Nah, I love Fate, because I knew, my husband doesn't believe me, but I knew from the moment I shook his hand, I would marry this man. It was like this booming voice. He's like, I
Maybe
don't
you
believe
are
ya.
a witch.
Listen, I knew. It was just like, whoa. I was like, oh, okay. He doesn't believe he's married 11 years. 11? Yes.
I told mine I wasn't gonna date him. So that's I was
Or any challenge.
I love
like,
it.
I was trying to be mature. I was like 21. I was like, hey, look, I'm not in a great place. I'm not dating anyone. He said, cool, me either. And then like a month later, we're like, we're basically dating, and we need to admit that, because otherwise it's just like we're being
Love
I was
that
14.
that's
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
14. 13? No,
Oh.
14, because then we got engaged. It was like November. And then we got engaged the following April, the month before I turned 15.
This is not the rabbit hole I was expecting this panel to go
Neither
down.
was I.
Yeah.
Yeah. And here we are, 41, doing a romantasy panel, living the dream.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah. So if you need inspiration for your next novel, I mean, right here. Okay, this one is mostly for like the contemporary cozy romantasies. I'm sorry. As I was reading them, I noticed a lot of like the crystals and the spells and the herbs and like the magical correspondences thereof. Did you all have to do much research into it? Because, you know, it's a real practice even now in order to keep it authentic / respectful.
I would say yes. For me, because I mean, I grew up with that. My mom is a very much esoteric person, where she would have amethyst around the house, like the incense, the oils, everything had to mean something. She wasn't just like putting on patchouli just because. She was putting on patchouli because it's like, okay, frankincense and myrrh for protection, for this, for that. So yeah, I grew up with that. So I definitely did research, and going to the shops here in New York and going into shops in New Jersey, and definitely like looking at, we used to have, it's not there anymore. There was a shop called Winds of Change, and my mom would go there all the time. My brother got a cold, she needed something to supplement, like trying to get like the cold out of his chest, or if she needed some oil, or she needed anything, she would go there. Is the Botania So it was that little spell shop she would go to, and that was like the inspiration for the spell shop in Kiss and Spell, because I grew up with that. So now I have crystals. I have my local crystal shop that I go to. I have my bracelets that my daughter wears, you know, for protection. So there's those things that I definitely did research, but it was also things in the book that are things that I do myself. So it's nothing in the book that isn't like, oh, I've heard of it, let me put it in. I said, no, I've done this. Or, you know, I have my luck jar, I have my crystals, I have my incense and my oils. So that's the type of research I did. Yeah.
I did not, well, I didn't really grow up with it, but I have witchy friends essentially that were basically on call, where especially in this book there's a lot of like foraging, and if I tried to forage stuff I would poison myself. Like, that's not a good idea for me.
Yeah.
And so I had to keep messaging them that not only like, hey, would you use this for something like this, and also, can we find it locally? Can we find it in this season? What does it smell like? My poor friends, the amount of questions they got from me. Where it's like, hey, sorry, again, weird. Would it taste like this? Like, just authors send you the weirdest questions. So I was lucky to have that. I was also lucky that so for this book, Will, my main character, is an arcane piercer. So it's sort of a magical body piercing situation. My husband's been a body piercer for like 20 years. So he was also on call of like, how would you describe this? What does this process look like? And like what kind of, like, you know, what kind of stones I would use for certain piercings and things. So it was a lot of me Googling and also messaging people constantly. Because yeah, I didn't grow up with any of it.
I just came across something really cool for the people writing hedge witches. The terms like eye of newt and wing of bat actually are reference to herbal elements that didn't necessarily have, it was coded. So eye of newt is mustard seed, wing of bat is holly leaf because it's shaped like a bat wing.
It was to protect their recipes.
Mm-hmm.
So that like randos come in like, I can just make that. That's if they didn't know the ingredients.
So yeah, they're out hunting newts when they need a mustard seed.
It's really cool. I love that.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Yeah.
Random research. I love it.
So do I. Like, that's the fun stuff. We'll go to my library and find out, oh, let me take a look at this book. Or just kind of like figure out what I do just kind of to ground myself. Like, we have this amethyst that was like, I got to charge my crystals. It's the summer solstice. I got to make sure all my crystals are laid out. And it's just like, it's a comforting thing. It's just like, all right, it's charged, good, and try to have positive intentions when you start the day, or when I write something, or when I do something. So I try to do that. So yeah.
Rose quartz is one of my favorites, and sage is my favorite herb. I've got a big old pot.
Oh, beautiful.
Various things, rosemary, thyme, lemon balm, and my favorite.
Oh, you got the starter pack.
I do.
For it.
Yeah, I got into all that when I met my husband at 13, 14, something like that. So it's been a minute. Did I check? I did not. I have my handy dandy notebook that Steve would be jealous of. I mean, it's like 5 notebooks.
I'm here for notebook moments, always.
Every one of them is cut. Yeah, I've got legends and lattes and everything else in there. So whoops, but it won't stay open. I have to put my phone on it. Okay. I know y'all did research on in the crystals and the herbs and moon phases and stuff like that. What about for Jacqueline and Claire and Sue for like weapon types and the fabrics used and what time period you were doing, and the magic systems that you decided on? And Sue Lynn, I am still just upset every time I read your books. I want a moon cake and they're not in season. You owe me moon cakes.
A lot of festivals coming out. I see them everywhere.
I need
Not
it.
to make you jealous or anything, but I actually have some today. They're really good.
I am jealous. Honeymoon cakes. Okay,
Well,
go.
I write alternate historical fantasy or romantasy. So I do a ton of research and then edit it heavily. So there can be, I spent hours researching Renaissance stagecraft and ended up using one tiny detail. But sometimes that's what you need to really ground what you're doing, especially if you're creating a world out of whole cloth or totally altering the cloth of the existing world. Those little details that tack it into place that have, sensory elements are what ground your story and also spark the reader's imagination.
Well, for the books, they weren't grounded in a particular period of time because they're immortal, so time is, well, not as relevant as it is here. But I took it back to like ancient time when they wore like traditional like hanfo, the long flowing robes and everything. That was very fun to research. I spent a lot of time researching as well the mythology behind it because there are all these different variants of the tale, each one that portrayed the moon goddess in a different light. And I completely agree with what you said about bringing the world to life. I spent a lot of time like researching like the right phrases to use in terms of like how the buildings might look, or what plants or trees would make sense in particular areas. And dragons is one of my favorite parts because I love dragons, Western and Asian, and I really wanted to bring out the Asian dragons, which are creatures of water, and they're actually very benevolent and wise, kind, and they actually don't have wings. So I was trying to imagine how they would actually fly without wings. Oh, and I spent too much time, I think, trying to research archery, because the main character is an archer, and so I was trying to think about how what was the material that would be used in ancient times, like whether it be silk or mulberry wood, and the sound that it would make as as it was released and everything. So yeah, that was pretty fun though. The mixture of reading and YouTube videos.
I took archery because of Sailor Mars.
Oh, I should ask you.
One of the things so there were a couple of things I researched. One was clothing and wardrobe for this is a second world fantasy. It doesn't take place in our world, but it's, quasi-regency analog. And so I did a lot of research into just various kinds of like Regency and also quasi like medieval wardrobe and clothing. And one of my favorite pieces of visual inspiration research is this, I think it still exists. I haven't been on it in a while, but it's a Tumblr called A Game of Clothes instead of A Game of Thrones. And it's somebody who like basically goes through fashion archives and designer archives and posts different pieces of clothing and garments and then assigns them to like different characters in Game of Thrones. And I found that an excellent jumping off point for learning more about different kinds of fabrics and different kinds of fashion designers. And that's been very helpful. Jacqueline was talking about sensory details being very grounding in, especially a second world fantasy that's in a completely different world. And so researching elements like fashion, garments, fabric, like what a specific fabric feels like around a person wearing a dress made of that fabric. That's one of my favorite things to research and one of my editor's favorite things to cut down because I overwrite. But she is correct. No one wants to read like 5 pages about the way a dress looks and feels except for me.
I do. Send it to me. I'll read it.
Noted. And then another thing, which is not really fantasy related, but the main character in A Crown of Ivy and Glass, Gemma, she has anxiety. I also live with anxiety. She also has chronic pain. I do not live with chronic pain, but one of my dearest friends does. And so one of the elements of research I did was just talking with my friend a lot about what the experience of living with chronic pain is like. And that was a huge part for me of grounding this fantastical story in a very human challenge, which is that Gemma lives with that and has to deal with that every day. And that's a part of who she is.
Yeah, when I was reading your book, I did appreciate how the chronic pain was handled because I've got scoliosis and sciatica and a couple of other things. So reading that, it's like, well, yeah, she's gonna love fancy dresses and parties and hair and makeup and the glamour
Anything-
stuff, and it's like,
Yeah.
what else are you gonna do? Well, what
Yeah,
else am I gonna do? I can't speak for everybody who has chronic pain, but you know, when I'm laid up, I'm just gonna read some fancy stuff or watch Sugar Apple Fairy Tale on Crunchyroll.
Yeah, it's definitely one of her coping mechanisms is a love of fashion and parties and having fun wherever she can find it.
For those of you who like the Touch Her and I'll Kill You, I do recommend Sugar Apple Fairy Tale on Crunchyroll. It's also a manga series and light novels, which I also have those. How much more time do we have? Okay, we got 20 minutes. I don't know how to see the chat to do questions from the people.
Okay, do you have any favorite sites for researching things like archery, swordplay, etc.? Is a question over there. I like to recommend the archives of the Society for Creative Anachronism, because those people have done a lot of the research for you, and they will provide the earliest source material possible, which I find when you're writing historical fantasy is really valuable. Anybody else have favorite research sites, resources?
I'm a public
No,
library
yeah.
girly. Like I will go to the library and I will get as much as possible. I also love going to like thrift stores. Going to thrift stores, finding old books, just going around and just exploring as much as possible. So that's how I get myself, like most of my writing resources online have to do with the craft of writing. And so just the usual stuff. I go to Writer's Digest, I go online. I do a lot of Instagram because I take things in. I love, what is it, Enchanted Living, that magazine. Oh my gosh, their Instagram feed is like a dream come true. Just getting resources from there. That's how I.
There's a book that came out, I don't know, but it's time, a little bit ago, before now, a book that came out before now, but not too long ago, that was called Putting Fact in Fantasy. And it's a collection of different, for like people on this that are writers are trying to put together a story. It's a bunch of different writers writing little essays on like, hey, you're writing horses wrong, or hey, how do you build your army, or hey, if you're writing in the Wild West, here's what you're getting wrong. And what's great about it is it each essay, I mean, it really does cover like a lot of stuff. Each essay ends with a list of resources, so a list of other books and stuff you can read. That's really great. I also, besides everything else that everyone mentioned, I follow some experts of this stuff on TikTok. Like I follow an archer that will he'll try different movie stunts and stuff with different kinds of bows. And so you can hear the bow, you can see also like how his muscles are moving. I mean, things that like writer nerds love forever. Sometimes you just find the experts out there, and then you just harass them on the internet politely. You politely ask them questions.
Love being asked. Like I will say that people who are like really into it, they love being asked questions. You're like, hey, I'm a writer. Their face like, oh, you're right. I said, I'm doing research. Can you help me? And they're like, yes, we'll help you. I've had some really generous people just kind of like, all right, does this sound right? Does this sound okay? It's like, yeah, that sounds okay. And just getting that kind of like thumbs up approval, especially if someone who lives it, really helps.
They want to be represented properly. There's nothing like, I mean, my mom was a nurse for 50 years. We could not watch ER, for example, like because she'd go up and she'd be like, nope, and then like walk out. And so things like that, like when you know that you're that the author took a minute to be respectful of like what you're into, what your profession is, and all that stuff, like it's huge. So like a lot of times, yeah, they'll answer your questions as long as you're being polite and respectful in your approach.
Absolutely.
I found the chat.
Yay!
Yeah, I figured it out in my geriatric millennial age. It's good. I liked someone had asked, I didn't write down names, I'm so sorry. What aspects of characters you like to outline before you start writing your novel. But that can also be, are you a plotter or a pantser? I can't write like an outline to save my life.
I
So-
write.
Plotter to the nth degree over here. I'm just gonna out myself. I'm usually the most extreme plotter on the panel. Do I have anybody else with me?
I used to be.
Yes.
I used
Yes.
to be.
I
And then,
tried.
yeah, it was like I would plot my little heart out. I would do Save the Cat. I would do story grids. I would do all that stuff. And then I wrote the book and I was like, that's not going to work. And then I would scrap it and just like, I'm going for vibes. So I'm a little bit of both. Like I'll plot and then I would just completely like sweep it off the table and go like, I'm going free bird. I don't
That's me, yeah. I'm
completely
the
empathize.
combination of the two. So I will like outline, and then if I'll suddenly find myself deviating, I'll think, well, I'll just follow where this goes, because then we'll work our way back to the actual plot.
Yeah.
But like Claire said, I do overwrite, so then I end up going back and then editing very heavily. So
Yeah,
I'm a
I'm like
pantser.
Jacqueline. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Lish.
I said I'm a pantser. Like I usually have like a exploratory draft where I'm figuring it out. So I don't outline characters at all or anything like that. Like I kind of have a vague idea sometimes of who they are, or sometimes they just show up fully formed. It's a weird, mysterious process that I wish I could teach people a little bit better. But like I just kind of go for it and figure out things, and then I underwrite. So my drafts will be real thin. And then I go back and add in like all the the world building details that I maybe that fix plot stuff, add more stuff to character and make it work.
Yeah,
wish I could plot.
what was that last thing you said?
I said I wish I could plot.
Oh. Yeah, I plot really heavily in terms of like the plot, but characters, I don't do a lot of, I have a vague idea. And then it's like I get to know them during the drafting and the editing process. And I don't really feel like I have enough information to have filled out like a character profile until I'm done. But the plot itself, I plot really heavily. I have spreadsheets, I have lots of lists, and inevitably that will change as the drafting progresses. But like if I don't have a roadmap to get started, I will never get started. So even though it ends up changing as I go, like I need that wild spreadsheet to get me started.
do you ever find that when you're writing your characters, because you're getting to know them as you're going through the plot, do you ever come to the point where you're like, well, they would never actually do what I've plotted that they should do, and then you have to figure it out?
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, as you get to know them better, it's like, oh, actually this character would not do this whole plot that I've engineered, so I have to go back and adjust. And that's fun though, because it's part of the creative process, and it's like rediscovering parts about the story as you go, even with that big outline to help you. It's fun. It's a process of discovery, even if you outline.
I do an outline as well. I have to know where the story is going. If it makes sense. I'll try to like figure out, if there are any big holes or anything. But I think, but I kind of follow my instinct as we go along. Like I change a lot, so I will have this draft, and it will at the end it might look completely different, but at least more or less the beginning and the end will kind of look the same. So I leave a lot of space to like color the blanks with the characters. For me, like everything has to feel very natural as a result of how things happen, because sometimes it's very hard to see what the next step is until everything has taken place and everything. I did try plotting a lot more extensively with spreadsheets and everything, and then I went back and I kept changing everything after every chapter. So I think I'm kind of in between veering to more the passing side, but yeah.
I always found, well, when I used to write, that if I did character profiles or wrote out plots, then I just got bored. Because part of the fun of reading is as you're reading, you get surprised, you learn new things, and by pantsing, you just surprise yourself. I know this person too well.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I at university, what you would call college in America, I did English literature with creative writing, and I used to do the same thing with my essays. I would start out with one theory and I'd end with another theory, and so I'd have to go back and try and make it look like I meant to get there all along. Somewhat successful.
Yeah, I feel that. I went to college for English creative writing and classical literature. It was just a bunch of epic poetry, which I still enjoy.
I like this question that I'm seeing in the chat. Do you like to listen to music when you write, or do you need it to be silent? I guess my question is, how do you like to write when you write? And I just want to answer that really quick. So I used to be I think Kel, you said you used to be a trumpet player, or your
No, my husband did trumpet. I did drums, percussion, and taught myself the flute.
Awesome. So I used to be a trumpet player, and music is a huge part of my life and my process. So I love listening to music when I'm like building the vibe before I start writing. And then if I'm like writing a battle scene, which I hate, and yet I keep writing books that require them, I will put on some kind of actiony track from like a movie score, and I'll put it on repeat just to like get myself in the mindset of like, okay, action, movement, this needs to be propulsive, this needs to be really exciting. When I'm editing, I usually need quiet or some sort of white noise, like Star Trek Voyager sound effects for 10 hours on YouTube. So that's just me. I'm interested to hear what other people do in terms of music.
I go all over the place with mine. It's it kind of depends on how much am I having a hard time focusing. If I'm doing okay, music is fine. If I'm not doing okay, I'll switch to music without words, because classical is different. Sometimes I do mood music, and then a lot of times too I'll do like white noise. For me, I'll even just put the headphones on and not turn them on sometimes, because there's sort of that, like, it's sort of like that sort of Pavlovian switch where you put, okay, this means it's time to write, and so I'll put headphones on, and then like an hour later go, I never turned anything on, I just put on headphones like a strange person.
Well, at least you wrote. You could have spent that hour looking
it
for
works.
playlist, right?
But it works for me. It is a signal to my brain of this means we're working. And so like sometimes it's music, sometimes it's classical music, sometimes it's white noise, sometimes it's turned off headphones.
You ever listen to video game soundtracks or movies? I do a lot of Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, and Zelda. There's lo-fi Zelda, and it's really good.
Yeah, I do Studio Ghibli soundtracks because I want to live in a Studio Ghibli film. That helps when I'm writing. It's playlists. My Spotify playlist is a mess. Just like I'll put the character inspired playlists. But if I'm drafting or editing, I just put on like YouTube videos that I've seen 100 times, or I'll put on like reruns. So it's just background noise. I've seen it so many times, I don't have to really pay attention. And so that's how I get myself in the zone.
I like it when it's really quiet. I have like headphones, and I find I actually write best, especially in terms of like dialogue or certain scenes when it's really, really quiet, because I like to have the conversations in my head first, I guess. But when it comes to particular scenes, like for me, very emotional scenes, romantic scenes, battle scenes are a big one for me too. Then I try to listen to music beforehand. Like I'll listen to something like rousing or something really romantic to kind of get in the mood, and then it's silence. Yeah.
Got it.
I always loved the idea of listening to music, but I come from a family of 6 kids, so I have this incredible ability to just phase everything out. So I won't hear it if I'm writing. So it's kind of a waste of time. But I like the idea of like building the vibe and finding that. I wouldn't be able to listen to anything with words though. I feel like I would get distracted if there were words happening. Right. But
yeah, I'm with Sophie. I everything goes away if I'm in the zone. So what's the point?
Yep, I'm the same way. My husband could be talking and I have no idea. I'm like, you have to tap me. So luckily he knows that by now. But even at work, I'll have, the lo-fi Zelda or best of Lord of the Rings and Hobbit. There's a Dionysus mix that I like to listen to. But then I'll like lift my head and I'm like, wait, I like this song. So I have to go back and restart it because I wasn't paying attention. So I couldn't hear it. So like Sophie, if I'm listening to music while I'm reading, which I don't, or I'm writing or whatever, I don't hear it anyway, which works out because if my husband is playing his Star Trek Online, unless he does the Dabo mini game, which I absolutely love those sound effects, and he does it just for me because he hates Dabo. I block it all out. Watch One Piece, I can't hear it, which is a good trick to have sometimes.
And Can I ask another question that I'm seeing in the chat that I like? What fictional relationships have you taken the most inspiration from when writing your books? I really want to hear people's answers to this. Anybody? One of mine is, one of my favorite fictional relationships is Fire and Brigand from Fire by Kristen Kishore. And it's just such a sweet, slow romance of like two frightened, broken people coming together and making each other stronger. And it is just beautiful and very sensitively written. And it is the bar against which I judge all romance relationships in books. So that's one of my favorites. I'm always thinking like, how can I make readers feel the way I felt when I read Fire and Brigand? So I'd love to hear other people's answers.
I'm quite inspired by Chinese Xianxia dramas. I'm not sure if anyone here has watched any of them, but they tend to be quite long. But what I like is that they're long, but they also spend a lot of time like building characters' relationships with each other, like romantic ones as well, like from the beginning. There is a lot of angst, a lot of yearning, and a lot of pining as well. And because of that, I tend to get like swept up in a lot of like the romances in there. And yeah, I guess I'm also looking for the same feeling basically.
I don't watch K or C dramas, but I do read like the Danmei, and they're long, but they're so dramatic. And I like to read the manhwa also, and it might take forever, but you don't get bored.
Which ones do you like?
There's that new one, I think it starts Chaos, that steampunk Sherlock Holmes one. An editor at Seven Seas noticed me. Senpai noticed me. So now she sends me stuff. So I've gotten to now, was it Remnants of Filth was the other one. But I do have Grandmaster Danmei Volume 1.
Oh yes, that one.
Yes, but only Volume 1. I need to get Volume 5 because we have a special edition of it at work, but I need to wait till payday because I have a stack of like 3 other manga that I need to get to, only one of which is actually mine. The other 2 are for my kid, Kaiju no 8 and Wonder Cat Q-chan, and then the volume 2 of the new Lodos spinoff was for me. So I grew up as a teenager watching Lotus.
I'm gonna go lowbrow and say I don't know whether anyone watched the cartoon Anastasia movie when they were younger. Dimitri and Anastasia's enemies to lovers. It's cannot be surpassed.
Sorry, sometimes I can't control my face.
And of course there is Anne and Gilbert from Anne of Green Gables. I absolutely love their story in the books, and also the Megan Fallows adaptation that she did with Jonathan Crombie. I think they were a fantastic casting for it. But again, it's the whole enemies to lovers or friends to lovers, that kind of vibe that I really like, and try and bring to the books that I write as well.
I think a lot of mine come from film. I mean, we already talked about Willow. I mean, who doesn't love Mad Mardigan and Sorsha? Animated Robin Hood, the Fox, and like that kind of stuff. Princess Bride. Yes. I mean, anything in that. Charming Rogue is a big thing for me. To go for real deep cut, I recently watched this 80s film called Ice Pirates, which probably, if you've seen it, I'm shocked, frankly. It's got like Angelica Houston though with swords, so that's awesome.
That's such a good movie.
It's very much it's a humorous sci-fi, but it's basically like pirates in space, and there's a big romantic element to it. And so the Charming Rogue kind of thing from film and stuff is huge for me.
This Ice Pirates is fantastic, and so is I like Pirates of Penzance, but Ice Pirates was amazing. It was really like not like super great cinema, but it was at the same time.
I mean, I'm not here for super great cinema, really. I mean, it's fine, I like it, but in general, no, I'm here for fun.
I know Howl and Sophie, Howl's Moving Castle. I saw that in college. And I was just like, I'm sold. I love that relationship. So that's pretty much it for me. Like K-dramas. There's one K-drama on Tubi, Playful Kiss. I like watched 3 episodes in one sitting. I was just like, oh my goodness, that is how you do enemies to lovers. Because the way it's like, I was like, because he really hurt her feelings. I was like, how is he going to pull this off? And just the gradual change and the fact that they make each other better. I'm like, I'm obsessed. I have to get back to it. That's going to be it for me.
Okay, we've got like 2 or 3 minutes, so I want to take that little bit of time to thank everybody for making this first huge panel super duper fun for me. It was a lot less nerve-wracking than my anxious brain made it seem. So I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll have to try to get physical copies of the 2 books that I don't have that I've already forgotten because my brain doesn't retain info like that. It was Rough Around the Hedges and Castiel's Servant are the 2 that I still need to get. And the questions from the people who joined in were fantastic. And everybody is just so nice. You made this so much easier than I could have ever imagined. So thank you. Nona loves you. Nona loves you. And I do too.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. It's really fun.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great
Now I have
rest
loads
of your
more books
day.
to add to my TBR.
Yeah, I'm off to work at the bookstore now to sell everyone's